What's up, guys? It's Roast Beef here with another jungle guide. Today, if you couldn't already tell, I'm talking about Fiddlesticks, the ancient fear. Fiddlesticks is actually the #1 jungler right now with a 52.41% win rate, and I think that's really because of his excellent teamfight potential and his passive vision control, which also gives him really good pick potential with the combination of those two. Anyways, we're going to start out with Fiddlesticks' abilities, and then go into what runes and items work best in him, and then I'll talk about how to handle your first clear, ganking, objectives, and then early to late game strategies. Once all that's done, we'll finish the video off with some of my favorite tips and tricks that I want to share with you guys, so make sure you stick around to the end for that. If there's just a certain section you need, check out the timestamps below to skip to it. If there's a champion you want to see next, or a tip that I forget to mention, drop it in the comments below. If you enjoyed the video, make sure you drop a like, and if you want to see more jungle guides, make sure you subscribe to the channel, because I make a new guide every single week, usually. With all that said, let's get into the video, starting with Fiddlesticks' abilities. For Fiddle's abilities, you want to grab W, E, W, Q for levels 1 to 4, and yes, that's 2 points in the W for a single point in the Q, because you're doing a full clear, and then you'll max R, W, Q, E. Now that the ability order is done, let's break down those abilities, starting with his passive. Fiddle's passive is a harmless Scarecrow, which gives him a unique trinket that functions as a clone/ward that can't do damage, but it can scare people. These things are called effigies. If Fiddle stands still for 2 seconds, you can also pose as an effigy, and this will work with your Q passive to terrify people, but more on that later. Once Fiddle hits 6, the trinket can also serve as a temporary pink ward, revealing enemies and any stealth trap nearby for 6 seconds after being placed. The way this trinket works is kind of similar to a ghost portal, in that it stays providing vision until an enemy walks close enough to activate it, at which point it will fake an action, like channeling your ultimate, or flashing, or just walking in a direction. And after doing that, it'll die or disappear, or if the enemy hits it with an ability or damage of any kind. Fiddlesticks' Q is Terrify, which has him scream at a target and fear them, along with dealing % current HP in magic damage. If the target has been feared by Fiddle recently, then this does double damage. The passive effect causes Fiddle's spells that hit from Fog or War to fear the opponent for the same duration, and like I was getting to earlier, if you pose as an effigy, you can also get the fear off, even if the opponent has vision on you. Fiddle's W is Bountiful Harvest, which forms a tether between himself and all enemy units within 650 range, revealing them if you don't also currently have vision of them. Then, Fiddlesticks drains HP from the targets over the following 2 seconds, and if the tether is not interrupted, meaning broken before the final tick at 2 seconds, that last tick deals extra execute damage. As long as Fiddle is not CC'd or doesn't interrupt his own cast by moving, the cooldown will be reduced by 60% at the end of it. Fiddle's E is Reap, which does magic damage in an area, slowing enemies and briefly silencing any that are caught in the center circle. And finally, Fiddlesticks' R is Crowstorm, which has Fiddlesticks channel for 1.5 seconds before blinking to a location. On arrival, a murder of crows storms around Fiddlesticks doing large amounts of magic damage. That's your bread butter. Anytime you have R up, go gank, go in team fights. That's what you do. Anyways, that wraps up Fiddlesticks' kit, but be sure to stick around because I'm going to cover over a few more tips and tricks at the end of the video. But with that said, let's move on to runes and items. When it comes to runes, Fiddle likes to run Electrocute, Cheap Shot, Eyeball Collection, and Ultimate Hunter in the Domination tree, along with Perfect Timing and Cosmic Insight in the Inspiration tree. I'd like to point out that Fiddlesticks has more options than a lot of other junglers though, and both Predator and Dark Harvest are very good and popular choices for the primary Domination rune instead of Electrocute. Dark Harvest gives you some scaling, finishing damage throughout the game, and Predator gives you a lot of mobility to help catch people out for ganks, since Fiddle's ganks can be kind of lackluster pre-6. Along with those changes, if you'd like, you can take Sudden Impact instead of Cheap Shot, but that'll really only work on your ultimate, so it'll be more limited in usage, but it'll give you a lot of damage in those instances, but Cheap Shot is probably more damage over a longer period of time. And along with that, if you don't like running Stopwatch, you can try Futures Market instead, as that's a very popular rune that can help you get your big items faster. On the topic of items, it's best to start Blue Smite and a Pink Ward since you rely on Burst, and you actually don't really have any need for potions because of your W. And then you'll build a Rocket Build of Leandri's into a Zanya's 9 out of 10 times. Rocket Build is really good for mobility against squishy targets, and Leandri's is really good if the enemy team is super, super tanky, like Set, Malphite, Leona all on one team, you know? After those, you'll add Sork Boots when possible, and then grab Morlamicon or Void Staff, Demonic Embrace. Those are the 3 really good core items after, or Banshees or Rylai's, just depending on how fed you are and how the enemy comp is built up, whether a lot of AD or if they're just slow and you need some slows, all that kind of stuff, you know. But with the build settled, let's move on to gameplay. But again, make sure you stick around to the end, because that's when I'll cover those super important tips to help you carry more games with Fiddlesticks. Now that Runes and Items are settled, let's look into when and how you should play Fiddlesticks. If you're wanting to play Fiddlesticks, there's a couple things you want to look for in your team and in the enemy team. Some really good ones in the enemy team are them being really squishy or immobile, because Fiddle can burst and destroy them before they know what's happened. Or if your team just lacks magic damage. A good indicator not to pick Fiddlesticks is if your team is really already heavy, like 2 champions already AP damage, because you'll be overweight one side and they'll just build MR versus you and it's not fun. A really cool thing you can synergize with is any kind of AoE teamfight ults. So if your team has a Malphite, a Zyra, a Wukong, or a Misfortune, you and their R's together will decimate a team. Teamfight over, GG, well played. On your ability order, you'll take W, E, W, and then Q for levels 1 to 4. I know it's a little weird. And then you'll max R, W, Q, E, just because how important the W is on your first clear. And for that first clear, you will full clear on Fiddlesticks every time. You can start red or blue as a preference. If you start blue, you'll want to fight blue and Gromp together. And if you start red, you'll want to fight red and Raptors at the same time. And an important note is that for beginners, blue and Gromp is a lot easier because the leash range is more forgiving. But if you can get the red Raptors leash ranges down, that's a fine start too. Although it is a little bit slower since your CDR is going to be just a little bit lower. If you are worried about getting invaded, you can ward the side you aren't starting on Pixel Brush around 50 seconds to a minute to make sure you don't get invaded. And you can also watch enemy laners to see where they enter lane to determine, or rather when they enter lane to determine where the enemy jungler started, to make sure you'll be safe doing scuttle late or on time, however your timing is, it'll let you know. Another thing that's really neat is on Fiddlesticks, you don't actually need a leash, so feel free to let your laners walk to lane early to give them a very slight advantage, and also to leave the enemy jungler guessing as to where you started. In the early game, you want to focus farming up, and you're only going to really gank if the enemy is super low and overextended, as you don't have any good gap close to get your CC on until you hit level 6, unless you're running Predator. If you're running Predator, feel free to run people down all the time. You can technically drag an alone early due to your W, but it's kind of rough on Fiddlesticks, so if you can get a kill in bot and have one of them come to help, it's a lot better. In mid-game, once you hit 6, you get a huge power spike, obviously, and you want to try and gank whenever your ultimate is off cooldown. If the enemy is below 75% HP, your full combo plus a little bit of help from teammates should be totally enough to secure some easy kills. In the late game, you'll primarily be looking for teamfight flanks or nice picks with your ultimate or just some CC combo, as a good Fiddle R, literally one, can win entire games. Honestly. When it comes to objectives, you just, like I said earlier, you don't really do them that quickly, and I mean, you can sustain solo them due to your W, but it's just less than ideal, so try and get some teammates help to do it. Rift Herald's especially a pain in the ass because it charges and interrupts your W, and on those, be careful not to start your W before any CC from the objectives, because that will put it on a longer cooldown and you'll just be stuck there taking a bunch of damage and not dealing much. With those basics covered, let's finally get on to my favorite tips when I play Fiddlesticks. My first tip of the day is to sub to the YouTube channel. It helps me out, and it gives you all the awesome guides I've made and the new ones I make each week. And then you can also check out the Twitch, twitch.tv/roastbeef if you have any more questions. For the real tips, the first one is that your full combo should be R, Q fear, and then you'll wait for your fear to be near ending, then silence the enemy, followed by draining them until they're out of range. Next tip is, if you take Predator, make sure to get boots on your first pack so you can utilize it, because if you don't, it's such a waste of so much time. It's really awful. While clearing a jungle, try not to use Q or E too much, since their damage is kind of meh on monsters and minions, and you really want to have those abilities up if the enemy jungler decides to invade you, because having the Q, fear, plus the silence will probably save your life. Holding on to a pink or an effigy to make vision is clear before you ult is huge, because it means, 1, the enemy doesn't know you're ulting and they won't be able to dodge, and 2, when you ult in like that and they don't have vision of you, you get the free fear, which boosts your Q damage and also CCs them, makes it easier to land your E, just makes it makes everything work better. When you ult, if you have Proto Belt and Blue Smite available, you can use them to help make sure people stay within range, or just to get a little bit of extra damage. And then when clearing camps or fighting enemies, specifically on the Blue Smite, you can use the Blue Smite to slow them. Sorry, I forgot to say. When clearing camps or fighting enemies with your W, when you're already draining, you can use your Blue Smite not only to slow them and keep them in range, but to do a little bit more damage and thereby increase the execute damage at the end of the channel. And then the final tip I have for Fiddlesticks is, honestly, never, ever, ever, ever surrender. Because I can't tell you how many games I've seen where a Fiddlesticks who's been behind the whole game lands one good R, and that's it. GG, well played. Don't forget that. That's all the tips I've got for Fiddlesticks, but if this guide helped you, make sure you leave a like and subscribe, because that helps the channel grow, and it gets you guys more awesome jungle guides. I also stream Tuesday, Thursday, Sunday, 7 to 11 p.m. at twitch.tv/roastbeef, and it would be amazing if you could come by. I've also started a Patreon and made some merch, and if you're interested in supporting me, please check out either of those at the links in the description. That's going to wrap up this video, but as always, thank you for watching, enjoy the rest of the gameplay, and remember, keep it beefy, boys.
Play hit level 11.
Rise is doing something weird. Heads up. What's going on here? Okay, cat. Okay.
Rise is doing something weird, like being dead.
Honestly.
Alright, I have level 2 ult now. If I can give Cat a gigantic shield before Mord ults her. As I said that, Cat gets ulted. Surprise!
Damn, he flashed. Shit. He got me. I don't know if you get it, though. No! No!
So close.
Oh, I'm sorry, Kale. I was distracted. I'm just gonna take this.
Tower literally is 45 HP.
Shaco, you monster.
And it breaks. You can sneeze on that tower and it dies.
Shaco really is a cyberbullying them. What the fuck?
Hey, thanks for the increased ult cooldown, though. Much appreciated. Literally one more hit. If I had a little bit more AD.
Guys, walk that way. Walk that way. Do it. Walk back and clear it.
You know what? I'm just gonna backdoor it. I have enough armor to take some tower shots. By the time I get there, should have like 150-ish HP.
I missed that brush. I'm so sad.
I have ult in 40 seconds. You think they'll see me get over there? Oh,
damn, fun. What's the benefit of... Yeah, sorry, Kale. I've been a little distracted. Benefit of Rocket Build over other mythics. I know I usually go Lounger's Mnemonic because the burn is fantastic with W late game. That's probably true, yeah. So I think the idea behind the Rocket Build is you can get in range for your W and your E. And it's not as much raw damage, but the mobility is really important. Aww.
What?
That was going pretty well. Shit. Well, we'll keep playing together. We'll play some more games.
Why'd they FF?
I think they knew they'd lose unless we throw really hard.